Ready? Yeah,
Yes, we're
here we
ready.
go. I'm gonna call the meeting to order. 6:45. We have Isidro Medina, Ariel Miranda, O.C. Kaminer, Ebenezer Smith, our district manager, Wayne Benjamin, uh, Debbie Napavian, Jonathan Frometa, Richard Allman, Jim Berlin, Catherine Diaz, and the dear and beloved Mary Anderson. So we're gonna commence our meeting and go as smooth as we can. Um, my report is gonna be as short and sweet as it can be. It's gonna interlap with some of our district manager's report. Um, what we've done for the past month or so is to try and assess and reassess and redistribute a lot of the um, responsibilities that the staff had in the office when they were working in the non-virtual mode. But now that we've become 100% virtual without a date or an end date, it's probably seems indefinite for the next couple of months. We've assessed and reassessed what they've done. Something as simple as beginning with how they used to send the calendars. You know, as time consuming as that duty was, we're looking at a lot of that time and try and reassess it and redistribute it fairly so that they can have enough time um, that they can be functional. We've also, I'm sure that you guys have read the some of our email blast talking about how our two of the zip codes that belong to our community board have been the hardest hit from the coronavirus. 10032 and 10040. The numbers in April 2 are not even close to the numbers now. Um, I don't want to get into the details of how many casualties we've had because I don't think there's an accurate number, but there's a lot of people that we all know that have passed and that have gotten sick uh, from this virus. Um, we haven't taken a day off. The staff has been tremendously active and proactive in some of the things that the community has now looking for and need. Something as simple as a call that I received, and I'm sure that Benicio did as well. A person that was looking for if we had a number for a funeral home in which he could bury his father, and I've also gotten a few calls about the same. So we in turn, Ebenezer called the FEMA representative for the area, Rosalina Duarte, who in turn connected us with the New York City Emergency Office, and they gave us a list of contacts that was later distributed to the general public and ourselves in case that we knew of anybody that was in dire need of at least a funeral where they can bury their loved ones uh, in a decent way. Um, as far as businesses are concerned, small businesses are concerned, we've done completed the first part, the phase one, which is informing of the resources available with uh, as far as what businesses can go out there and get to help financial help. Debbie was talked at length in the past meeting about the NOMA fund, uh, the PPP, and a few other resources. And now we're going into the second phase, which is legal services and consultations. How businesses are going to be dealing with that wave of evictions that will be coming, and how much of coverage the insurances, existing insurance policies that we have, are going to be able to hold us and whatnot. So that's going to be next. That's going to be tomorrow. Uh, at 6:30, we're going to have a lawyer, Rolando Gonzalez from, um, I believe the institution is New York Legal Aid Society is this institution that he represents. Um, as far as the office is concerned, and going back to my original point of reassessing the needs of the virtual needs of our office, we're working into getting the telephone system upgraded so that the calls can be forwarded to cell phones that will be distributed among the staff members, so that they can answer phones and they can be directed equally, instead of just having Ebenezer answer all the calls as we have it now. And just got a letter from Tanya, in which it's a public letter. I'm sure some of you have read it, as far as Coogan's just pretty much officially saying that they're not going to be able to reopen. I'm sure that there will be, I know of a few that are pretty much under the same circumstances. So I say it with all sadness. I'm a business owner myself, and I know of a few who've already contacted their landlords. I'm not gonna disclose their names, but they're pretty known establishments, and we are facing the unknown, situation that it wasn't foreseen. That's pretty much my my report. I also like to end it in a positive note. During our board meeting today, after hearing all the others boards, I said with a lot of pride that we've accomplished probably as much, if not more, than anyone else, as far as our meetings and the way that we're conducting our meetings virtually, and the fact that we've had most of our committees already met virtually. So we've accomplished a lot, and that is the combination of all of our work. So I'm gonna now have our district manager's report. Ebenezer, please.
So I have a question.
Of course.
Do you know if Colombia gave them a break in the rent at all?
I couldn't answer that. It's not on the letter. But I do know that Colombia gave a 2 months waiver to all of the tenants across the board.
Columbia isn't their landlord. The hospital is their landlord. So what Columbia did or did not do could not be less relevant.
Okay. Thank you for the answer, Ebenezer.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Always a pleasure reporting as the district manager of Community Board 12. We are very sad with the news of Coogan's. A year ago, Community Board 12 helped them, to renew their lease. It appears that, it's a financial situation that they may have, because I received a phone call from Peter last Friday, asking me to give him some contact information from several city agencies. Going back straight to my report is, we're pleased to say that the Zoom platform that Community Board 12 have is already operated, where we had, in a way we can say, master it, and we can be able to host any meeting and even inviting the public. We are trying to expand our platform to have our meeting live via Facebook and via YouTube. We were trying to do a test this evening, but it was not possible. So Jonathan and I, we're gonna continue working with that. You may have noticed that our email from the staff, Paola, Chanel, and myself, it has now a link, a logo, connecting you to our Facebook page and also to our YouTube channels. We start to promote that, and we are doing it because we are looking to expand our work via social media and teleworking and the Zoom. So very soon we're going to be able to have a full general meeting with the participation from the public and also the question and answer. So the staff has been reassigned since the work now is virtually and we are teleworking. Most, I would say 80% of the work that the staff and myself doing from the office is now looking productive. and we make some arrangement to suit the staff work to the need of the board. So we had a meeting last Saturday night and last week on Wednesday. We had a long meeting with the staff discussing the situation at the new role. Now it's virtually. But we have several issues that we had to iron down, and we called the Manhattan Board of Presidents personnel office to have some guidance. Because, you know, the staff meetings, I'm sorry, the committee meetings start at 7, 6:30 and last 9, 10 o'clock. And somebody have to be there controlling the meeting, and the staff gonna be working controlling the meeting. But during this time, no overtime is approved. Our staff, when they work overtime, the way that we pay them or compensate them, should we say, is by comp time. So time that they can accumulate and use it at a later time. So what's gonna happen is that they're gonna sign out at whatever time the meeting finish, but they will not charge for overtime. And the reason we want to charge daytime work, because in the future, if any union negotiation or something decide to compensate, then is there, and also to have a record of the hours that they work. I received an email from Ms. Jocelyn Cubilete from New York City Census asking for our help to a date that they call testing count. They're going to happen on the 23rd this week, on Thursday this week. And I will be sending this information out. I was in communication with her until this afternoon because she was waiting for some specific language. But at the end, she told me, you know, send the email inviting. You're going to be receiving that email either later today or tomorrow morning. And what we're looking for is volunteers to work with the New York City Census to send tests and via text and telephone, communicating to people and peers to make sure that everybody has submit their census. And
Does everybody hear that?
What is that? So we're going to be sending that email, and you, if you are interested, you're going to be able to register. And the same date of the action day, you need to call before you shift to get the final instructions. Last week, we received an email from the city of New York asking for a program to eliminate the gap because of the situation that we have now with the coronavirus and the city not receiving revenue. The city is looking to reduce the expenditures. And the email that I received is that starting last week, we have a deduction of $4,000 in the personal services funds that we have. And also we have a projected $8,000 reduction for the personal service funds for next fiscal year 2021. I sent the email to the members of the executive committee this afternoon, along with a copy of the Crystal report. I know that you have been expecting, and the treasurer has been requesting an update of a new form that he sent me a few weeks ago. Nevertheless, the hard work we have been doing to have this platform ready did not give it any time to do a good job or to do it at all. I was not able to update neither the old form, the new form, so I sent the Crystal report that have the information there showing the negative $4,000 being deducted from us, and also the email that I received last Friday. And committees related discussion during the District Service Cabinet meeting. I had some discussions with the city agency regarding several issues that the several committees presented. Specifically, I discussed the inmate release from city jails. The Public Safety Committee passed a resolution and looking for expedite this release from the city jails, the inmates. And I presented the question to the DA's office, and the DA's office said that from the very beginning of the crisis, they were willing to have those inmates that have been there for minor issues to be released during this crisis of the COVID-19. Also, we had a discussion about the new city bike installation near the hospital at the district service cabinet meeting. And also we were demanding that DOT send us last Sunday, not yesterday, the Sunday before, a last minute email that they're gonna be installing an emergency city bike station near the hospital. And the board was very concerned that because of the crisis, they're trying to do some jobs that the public and the Traffic and Transportation Committee need to input into this matter. And this afternoon we had a meeting, a virtual meeting, a telephone meeting with the commissioner, Eleazar, Debbie, and myself. Debbie, I know she will be talking about that during her report. I also received an email from an applicant for the regarding the Board of Standard and Appeals application that we were entertaining. I sent that email that I received to the committees affected by this request. They are requesting be added to the agenda of the Youth and Education Committee, the Traffic and Transportation Committee, the Health and Environment Committee, and the Land Use Committee. And they would like to be added for next month and also be invited to the general meeting. This is an item that had been pending. We received this application early this year, and I believe it was on the agenda already for land use, either December or January, but they sent this request. So I sent the email to Eleazar and the chairs on these particular committees, and I would like to have a discussion of the if you're going to add it to your agenda for this coming month in May. And finally, I received an email this afternoon just before we start the meeting that the Community Board 8 start advocating for the Summer Youth Employment Program. The Summer Youth Employment Program has been canceled. I learned that last Friday during the Board of Service Cabinet meeting, and they start advocating to restore that program for this year. And I promised to them that I'm going to mention to you this evening in case you will decide to advocate also for the restoration of the Summer Youth Program. This is the end of my report. Is there any question?
Ebenezer.
Yes.
The BSA application to which you refer, is that for the Washington Heights Music Charter School?
Yes, for the school at 181st Street, yes, the same
Okay,
one.
so yes, they did meet with land use, I believe, in February, and they were going to meet with the other committees prior to coming back to land use. And also at the time they met with us, the environmental report was not yet done. I think the traffic study was not yet complete. So they were coming back to us after meeting with those other committees, not simultaneous with that. So, I mean, in May, land use would meet before any of those other committees. It would not make sense for them to be on the land use committee in May. It may very well make sense for them to meet with the other committees in May and come back to land use in June, but that presupposes that the environmental study, which is critical, is in fact advanced enough so they can have the meeting with Health and Environment.
Understood, understood. And I remember that was the recommendation you made to them last time. They sent us a communication before we close and go virtual. Let's see if the chair of the other committees would like to entertain that in May, and I will suggest them to come to your committee in May.
No,
in June. In June. Is there any other question? Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Allow me to unmute myself. I gotta get a hang of this about unmuting ourselves. Is this Isidro, are you aware of that the new school in 506 where the parking lot used to be, right across the street from the fire department.
Right.
That's the school that they're referring to. You
Yeah,
want to
so
chime in?
yeah, that building is to be gutted out completely. And the school, I'm aware about that school coming over. I had approached the employees there because, you know, they're going to lose their jobs. So I approached them and I left out my contact information set so that when the Youngwood development, which is right next door to it, will open, that these employees be considered to work right next door. But as we know, that project has now been put on hold. So, you know, I'm worried about the jobs that are going to be lost or get lost. I hope to have their contact information because now it's critical now that, you know, Youngwood's not going to be there. It's a school, so anytime that we are able to assist kids, I'm more than open to assist in whatever capacity I can.
I had a question for Ebenezer, but I just don't have a hand raise function here. When you can get back to me, thank you.
Yes, who is this?
It's Natalie.
Natalie, how may I help you? Natalie, how may I help you?
I'll let the chair decide when he gets back to that. I just wanted to alert him and I had no other way to do it.
Okay.
Eleazar, you're still on mute.
I'm sorry. Before you could go ahead and ask now before you move on to Lisa's report.
Okay, yeah, I didn't know if there was anything for
Yeah.
Isidro's point. But you were reporting on coverage issues because there is no overtime approved right now for hourly city employees. And I'm just wondering if you guys have considered the possibility that schedules can be shifted so that people just do late starts on the days when they need to cover meetings, which is what
Yes.
how we are handling that for hourly employees like myself.
Yes, that's pretty much.
Yes,
Oh,
we
go
spoke
ahead.
with Deirdre. We spoke with Deirdre about it. And in the past, we had a directive from the Human Resource at the Board of President's Office indicating that no employee should be signing in after 10 a.m. And yes, they kind of start at 10 a.m., but, you know, I discussed that particular with Deirdre. You know, people are starting at 10 a.m. in the morning, signing in at 10 a.m. in the morning. So I don't know how you guys do it. Natalie, you can bring us some light on this one. At what time you sign in when you have late meeting? Can you sign in at 12 noon?
Well, I mean, we do have the option of schedule overrides so that our 8-hour shift is shifted later under normal circumstances. But in the case of, something like this, a lot of times what I do is that I document that time, but don't submit an overtime request if I have already, under the special circumstances, been paid my full day. But you kind of understand that there's a piece of the official workday that the person is then absenting themselves so that they can have the coverage, even if it appears as uncompensated. So I'm happy to go to Deirdre and ask if those options are available for the titles in the CB office as well, and get back to you.
All right. I think we did have that conversation with her, but if you're more than welcome to get more guidance. But I think that, as Ebenezer just mentioned, we can kind of work around the hours. In those days in which they'll have to cover meetings, they can work in and work a little later and stuff. She was very clear. She hasn't given us a written guidance, but yeah, she was very helpful when we discussed it.
Okay, I'll let you know if there's anything new on my end. Thank you.
Thank you very, very, very much. Liz?
Okay, so as you can see, I'm coming to you live from, I don't know, one of our many parks. I'll be changing my backgrounds through the evening to reflect the full beauty that are the parks of Northern Manhattan. Our parks are open for business. The Parks Enforcement has a couple, of course, fields are closed for group games. The basketball nets are down for the most part. The ping pong equipment has been taken down, but the fields are actually open and the parks are open and they will stay open for as long as people are able to use the parks in a way that includes physical distancing. So if you are in the parks and you should happen to see people who are too close together, who are clearly not part of a family unit, you might want to remind people that we need to observe social distancing. And that under any circumstances, everybody should be wearing masks. Dog runs are closed. Parks Enforcement has a couple of vehicles out with loudspeakers mounted in 4 directions so that they can do passes through the parks and disperse groups of people. Playgrounds are closed. So that's sort of the situation for parks. I'm hoping beaches are still closed. They're open in Florida, God knows why, but beaches are closed. Pools are, the mayor has already gone ahead and announced that pools will not be opening this summer. It's not actually, and that beaches will also not be opening this summer. It's not actually clear if the reason for that is the public health imperative to reduce crowds, or if the reason for that is budgetary. I think we need to give it a little bit more time to see how this plays out, to see what, if anything, the governor does with this, what changes, if any, there are in the governor's executive orders regarding beaches and pools and such. But it may be that we're going to want to consider asking the mayor to allow pools and beaches to be open this summer, because I think there's a good public health argument to be made for them being open if the reason why they're being closed is budgetary. But that's not right now's problem, so I don't want to be distracted with that. I just want to park it in a far corner of your brains to think about maybe next month. In terms of cultural affairs, there's good news and there's bad news. The bad news is pretty obvious. Pretty much anybody that you know who is an artist or working with an arts or cultural affairs organization is either unemployed or financially struggling, and that's terrible. Our arts community has really rallied and is providing a lot of resources for, getting the word out there on various resources for arts and arts organizations. There's also just a tremendous amount of arts and culture happening online, and many ways for people to support that through what's called virtual tip jars. So even though we're not in bars, clubs, and restaurants, there are many, many opportunities to consume arts and to contribute towards that. Northern Manhattan Arts Organization, NOMA, has had multiple webinars and virtual meetings for helping the arts community learn more about resources to keep on going, ranging from the Northern Manhattan Arts Fund to Robin Hood and many other organizations, and providing technical assistance to artists on how to really exploit, in a good way, virtual platforms to bring art out into the world, both as a sustainable economic enterprise for themselves and also as, frankly, an appropriate healing mechanism for all of us who are, I think, really suffering inside of our homes, distanced. We're in a time of social distancing, but we need to also be connecting socially, even though we're apart physically, and the arts community has really been at the forefront of that. So I think that's pretty much all I have to say on that. We had a pretty good meeting last month. Minutes will be going up. That's it from here. Let me know if you have questions.
Yeah,
We hear the secretary report, please.
Well, we can do both at once. So you want to do both at once?
She just did the
You just did the
parts.
parts. You could vice versa, but we can just
Crap.
move
Okay.
on and
No,
you
I
could do it
did
but
that
later.
last time too. I
Right.
keep
Yeah.
forgetting
Yeah,
that
that's
I
okay. We
wear
can do
both
that later.
hats. And I did,
Okay.
I'm sorry. The
It's all right.
secretary's report is extremely brief. I've gotten some of the, my bad. I've gotten some of the information on attendance at committee meetings and have been adding that into my spreadsheet. It's a little bit difficult. I think some people have had an easier time than others in figuring out who's actually been at their meetings, but I've gotten most of the information from the office. And Ebenezer, if you could just ask Paola to make sure to send me whatever attendance sheets she hasn't already sent me so that I can roll that into my attendance spreadsheet. We did have a couple of members for whom we could be sending a notification that they are in danger of being removed for cause because of poor attendance. But that's really taken kind of a back seat to larger concerns in the community. So it's not that we're not paying attention to attendance, but it just feels, kind of small-minded that that's the thing that we're focusing on. So I think rightfully so, really, we're continuing to monitor our members' attendance, but going after them to enforce and to remove people just has not been the priority, and I think is not going to be the priority until we're back to a more normal actual meeting as opposed to virtual meeting format. Would you say that's about right, Eleazar?
Okay. Thank you, Liz.
I'm gonna go with yes.
Really appreciate that. Gerard, sorry, going back to the original stacks. Gerard was in the back as one of the participants. He hadn't been put in the panelist stack. So my apologies. So just for the records, for the minutes, Gerard, please.
No worries. Thank you, Chairman. I want to thank Ebenezer for his earlier email. I got about an hour before the executive committee. I got an email from Ebenezer relaying some issues with filling out the template that I had created when I first started. But he did attach the crystal report and some of those other things. So I did send you, Ebenezer, I don't know if you got my email, but I did want to reply, and I sent it to the executive board committee members as well, because I just want to be clear that I know that the crystal report for many members, that they're executive committee or general board members, a crystal report is not what they're really looking for. They're looking for something like the template to communicate in a very succinct way, you know, what the budget is, where we're at, and what may be available, or could be repurposed for something. That's why I sent my email, because I don't want there to be a misconception out there that this template doesn't exist. The template was created for I guess, many reasons. It's been difficult getting this thing filled out so that it could be communicated to the executive committee and the general board in general. So I would just like to ask and repeat my request to you, Ebenezer. I would like, you know, moving forward, if it's at all possible, this crisis set aside, it's not even, I'm not even bringing it up in relation to what's going on. But regarding a report, the financial position of the board, I think going forward, if we could just, Ebenezer, get that a week before, you know, I'll make time, we could talk, we can look, we could see if it's, you know, got the actuals in and the forecasted numbers. And I believe that that will satisfy legit and fair questions that CB12 members and, you know, residents may or may not have. So that's my report. Thank you.
I want to make sure that I'm unmuted. Oh, here we go. I am. Yes, thank you, Gerard, for your report. We're going to move forward, move on to review and approve our future minutes, starting with May. Looking at the report, at the calendar, Does anyone have any changes that they would like to make in the calendar? If you look at it, or if you previously looked at it when Ebenezer sent it earlier this afternoon. No questions? No changes? So, Faye, is that you?
Yeah.
Faye?
No, yes, I've been listening. Yes. No,
Oh yeah.
I just
Would you like to make any changes?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
Thank you. And hello,
All right.
everyone.
Faye saying hello, everyone. So we're moving to get the minutes adopted. Gonna get some A's.
Eleazar, Mary Anderson want to say something.
Okay,
Eleazar,
Mary.
Mary Anderson trying to say something.
Mary.
Thank you, Ebenezer. I'm sorry, but I haven't gotten a chance to look at believe it or not, I've been busy today. Haven't gotten a chance to look at that May calendar, but I don't think we're going to have an actual meeting for May again. I actually ran into oh my God, Fern Hertzberg today, and we were talking, and probably better we should have just a conference call among the committee members to catch up on how everybody's doing and all. We did want to review, the only thing we wanted to do was to review the budget. And I sent an email, and I don't know if it went through or not, an email requesting that the budget forms, the actual budget for, I'm sorry, I sound like a blubbering idiot here. The actual forms for the budget from last year go to the committee members, including the 2 public members on the committee, so that we can begin to look at them at this stage.
Okay.
Jonathan, I'm sorry to interrupt, but can you make Steve Simon and Domingo Estevez panelists? Because they're on the executive committee and they should be up as panelists.
Domingo was a panelist not too long ago. What did he go?
I don't know. He's not listed as a panelist. He's listed now as an attendee. And Steve should also be a panelist. And Faye should be a panelist.
Yeah, Domingo
Faye is a panelist. Faye's
Domingo.
right there, right next to Domingo is Natalie, Domingo, and Faye, right in the bottom.
That's interesting. They're listed as both.
No.
Yeah, somehow Domingo was disconnected. Maybe he lost connection.
Yeah,
I see.
he's back.
All right, can you throw Steve in as a panelist? Thanks.
Question on May.
On May, yeah.
Yes, should I leave that question when I give my report, or should we address it now for the licensing committee?
If it's related to the calendar, I guess
Yeah.
this is the time.
So I was wondering about whether or not to conduct a meeting for licensing, since oftentimes we rely on the report from the 34th precinct, the 33rd, plus the residents. And I was wondering if this will be something that can be had, taking into account that most of our residents might not have access to this meeting. So I'm throwing that question to you all to see what are the options, if there are any options, for the license committee on May.
My non-educated answer would be that I'm assuming that your meeting is usually based on the number of applications that come to the office, right? So I don't see that volume of applications since all the restaurants are closed. And the order is for the restaurants to open or to have essential services open back in May 15th. So your meeting is on the 13th. So it would be an uneducated guess for me to speculate as to say, yes, you will have this many applications. So I will play by the ear, I guess. By the end of the month, you can make a decision based on the input that Ebenezer gives you to see if he's gotten any applications. That would be my comment.
So on that end, Ebenezer, I guess the office should make some attempts to reach out to respective precincts, then to be sure whether or not they can attend that meeting, this teleconference meeting.
Isidro, is the SLA open?
Yes.
Okay.
Limited, they're at limited capacity, yeah, but they're
Do they
working.
issue renewals and new licenses and all that?
Not sure.
Not sure.
Ah, so I think this should determine if you're gonna have a meeting or not. That's my view on this. If they issue licenses and renewals, then I say yes, hold the meeting.
But what applications are you going to approve if you haven't gotten it from closed businesses?
That's something, that's a whole other thing. If there are no applications, then.
That's what I said in the beginning.
Okay, got it.
So moving, we'll approve May calendars, or May's calendar. Any A's?
Motion to
Any
approve.
nays?
Yes.
Any abstentions? Nope. May is approved. June, moving forward to June's calendar. Any questions, any observations? Steve, yeah, Domingo.
My only concern is that since we're doing these like mini-series workshops, like I don't know what a meeting would look like. Are we saying that on top of the series of what you need to know that we're doing as a way of informing businesses and connecting them to resources, is that considered a meeting? Do we need to convene the committee as a meeting? I'm not sure, because it's very interesting at the moment where like it seems like we're having events, but we haven't necessarily convened as a meeting, or is like, yeah, I just need some clarity on that.
All right, I'll let Liz answer first, and then I'll go with the answer that I got from both Berlin and the Manhattan Borough's office. Liz.
Oh, well, given that you have an office from an answer from the Manhattan Borough President and from our esteemed parliamentarian, I will defer to them.
No. I mean, of course, your opinion matters just as much. You have the experience.
Thank you. I would suggest if you're doing the work of the committee, you got to get that out with meeting notification, and you've been doing that, and you should be taking attendance, and it seems to me like that counts. And as long as you're also providing the opportunity for there to be whatever other are your normal agenda items, then I think you're sort of covered on both of those bases.
That's the answer.
No, because the thing is that like technically a lot of these is like I'm moderating it, but I'm since I know that the committee is often might be working during that time, because basically what we have now is a runoff of a resource event that we did that had like over 80-90 people, and it was just so overwhelming that we chose to break it down into a smaller series of events. But I don't know, how does the event function as a meeting?
Based on sort of what we went through with the rezoning, and Wayne can correct me if I'm wrong, there was the one meeting from his committee, and there was a lot of other runoffs, and they were called special meetings, in which there was just informational sort of meetings, and they pretty much counted towards, like at least said, as to
Okay, so we should
attendance and so much.
Okay, so we should operate then and have our meeting at the beginning of the month in addition to whatever else we do.
Exactly.
Okay.
Thanks. June, anyone else has any questions as to the meeting dates?
I didn't receive a note or a calendar for June. I don't know if everybody else did, but I did not get a calendar for June.
They were both in the attachment, so I printed them both.
In one of the emails sent earlier today.
I can forward it to you now, Isidro.
Isidro, I got it at 12:51. I don't know if that helps you.
So we're good?
I got it, thanks.
All right, so make a motion to adopt June's calendar? Can I get some A's? Any nays? Abstentions? Nope. Calendar approved. And moving on to our committee chair reports. Do we have anything from IT, Jonathan?
Yes. Well, from my perspective, I only have a couple of things to basically to clarify to all of you guys as shares of your families. So one of the things that I've been seeing um different meetings is that people get confused between Q&A session and chat room. Even though we already clarified that chat room is a interactive chat where you can talk, you can say, "Hey, how are you?" You can you can guys talk each other whatever you need, right? We deactivated it due to security reason because if any people who received the middle link can like join us and start like pasting or sharing like URLs that we don't need to see, right? Um, I need to explain what kind of URLs or pages that we don't need to see or open. And the Q&A, the most common error that I see is that people sometimes ask, hey, how can I ask a question on the Q&A session? If you are panelist, I know most of you know this, but still some people ask the same question. How can I ask question on the Q&A session? If you're a panelist, you are um, you are the guy who is supposed to answer question. You are not supposed to ask question, but answers to the attendees list of invited people. And another thing is um, emails. We have two type of emails, okay? I normally see most of you joining the meeting through the attendees link. There are two links. One is the panelist link and the other one is the attendees link. If you use the panels, I mean the attendees link to join the meeting, yes, you can still join the meeting and one of us host or co-host, it still can make you panelists, right? But the right thing is that you have to join the meeting using the panelist link if you are a panelist. Some of you say that, oh, I don't receive this email. It's because since this email is an automated email by Zoom application, sometimes this email goes directly to the spam folder or to the trash or different folder than the inbox, and that's why you don't see it. The first time you move this email from the spam folder to your inbox folder, going forward, you will keep receiving this email on your inbox folder, okay? This is another common error that I've been seeing. And another thing is, I already said this at the very beginning of this meeting. In order to have a more smooth meeting, try to keep your mic muted, right? And only unmute it whenever you need to talk if you're a panelist or if you have the turn to talk, okay? And finally, Ebenezer mentioned that we are going live for the next meeting on our social network, either Facebook or YouTube channel. This meeting is not actually being recorded because we have some issues with Facebook. For some reason, Facebook page didn't start recording this meeting. But again, the general meeting will be ready to go live on our Facebook and YouTube channel. So far, all the meetings, at least all the meetings that were recorded, all the meetings were uploaded to our networks, meaning a Facebook page and YouTube channel. So all of you guys have access to all to Facebook, to our Facebook and YouTube channel. So one recommendation is you can whenever you need to share one of our previous meeting, try to share it through our either YouTube channel or Facebook page. All of you, I guess you guys have these networks. If you don't have it, like Paola's emails and Ebenezer emails and all the Community Board 12 office emails, on the footer of the emails, they have these links, meaning the Facebook link and the YouTube link. So you can access through those links. And if you need to share, which is something desired, we need you to share because we need to make all our meeting public somehow. You can get it from there and share it to all the people that you need to share it. That's all from my side.
Just that we received 4 different emails, at least I did, with the same link. So why it was sent 4 times? Any idea?
Now, since you are panelist, you were supposed to receive this morning one panelist email, which is the one you received when I created this meeting on Zoom. Another email that you received was the general email that Paola sent out this afternoon. I don't know what time exactly. And that's why you have 2 emails. You have the attendees email and you also have the panelist email. But
So what I'm saying is I received 3 from Paola and then another 1 from Ebenezer.
I'm not sure about it. Maybe they were clarifying something in there.
Yeah, if I could add to that, I looked in my spam and I never got any panelist email. So that's one issue. The other thing about the chat is even if it weren't vulnerable to being attacked, it turns out leaving the chat on during what we call a meeting would allow a second meeting to go on at the same time and consequently violates Robert's Rules of Order. So that's another reason the chat isn't there.
Yeah.
And so you got to look into Ozzy's observation as to how do we custom the email list that the system generates so that you don't have to get twice the same email. Because if you're going to be a panelist and then you get another email, as she said, as an attendee, then obviously you're just going to pick the last one you got. So instead of when you log in as a panelist where you should have been, then you log in as an attendee, and then that's where you always end up having to bring people from attendees to panelists. So we're gonna have to figure out a way of kind of playing around with
Yeah,
this.
that happened to me as well. I'm not I signed in with the only link I got, which was an attendee link.
Yeah. Although yeah, go ahead.
Just to clarify, this is the first time I noticed it coming across this way. The subject line for the panelist one had the word panelist. So when I did start getting a bunch of other ones, then I just was like, oh, wait, I think this is important. You know what I mean? So Jonathan, thanks for the clarification. And then I know that helped me then to be like, oh, that's why it says that in the subject line, because it's different.
Yeah, that's correct.
I also, for the Boris board, Debbie, and I Nosy, I got 4 different emails for the same invite for the same meeting. So I guess we're all learning through the process.
Can I just add something to Jonathan's comments here?
Yes.
Jonathan, we are, if I can just add a comment, we're, first of all, very, very grateful. We appreciate you and the role that you've had in this. And the borough president is thrilled that you are navigating this. I'm just going to throw out there as food for thought that the borough board uses the webinar format with a chat feature, but it restricts it so that there can be no one-on-one private chatting going on, that it's only the comments to the host of the meeting. So there's ways, and the reason I say that is because under normal circumstances at a CB meeting, me as the board coordinator, I really don't participate, but I do need to kind of observe what's going on in the engagement of others. And I would prefer, rather than to have to unmute myself and get attention, just kind of add a link to an event we're having or raise my hand. So just, it's something to explore, and you can always chat with Noel at Beta about about how we do it at borough board and how it's worked out.
Yeah. One thing is, yeah, that's right, and that's something we can adopt at some point. But I think the Q&A also can like satisfy this necessity at some point, right? Because you can, the difference between chat and Q&A is that chat, you can privately or publicly, you can ask question, and anybody from both sides, meaning attendees and panelists can answer that question and see your comment if your comment is public. And the Q&A, only panelists can answer questions, which is most likely what we really want, you know. But yes, if that is really needed and Q&A doesn't satisfy like completely this necessity, yeah, we can activate it and we can play with those settings that you mentioned. Yeah, like restricting or eliminating access, and you know, and like block people to chat privately or in public. But the only thing is that any people from both sides, panelists and attendees, they will be able to paste like content and links, and that's why at the very beginning it was prohibited. But yes,
No,
it can be.
Understood.
All
And
right,
if
so-
there's a way to have the just the hand raising feature, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, so
Thank you.
the bottom line is, so we can move on to Steve Simon. Something I learned when we were experimenting with the platform is that when you creating all the email accounts as panelist, and if I was to send, say, Debbie, my generated invitation, then if Debbie uses the one I sent her instead of the one that was designated for her, then on the screen it'll look, Debbie will have my name and her name instead of just having her unique name. So you have to be mindful of not re-emailing or resending what is designated to our own email, because
Yeah.
they're unique when you're creating them in the system.
Yeah, there is still a bug. I think, from my perspective, that is a bug from Zoom, that if I share my own invitation email as a panelist to any other person, this person can still access through this link, but this person will appear as using like my credentials, my name, my last name and stuff, right? Which is not the desired scenario. But yes, still people can share their own panelist invitation email to any other person, and that's why we don't want it. But that's a mistake.
Thank you for all the work, man. You've been key and instrumental to make sure that we all are looking at each other's faces. Thank you very much. I couldn't thank you enough.
Eliasar, let me interject very quickly to remind the committee chairs, if you have any a person that's going to participate in your committee, please send us the email and the contact information, and we will create a special email or credential for that person as a panelist in order to log into the meeting. Do not share your email as a chair of the committee to your panelists. That's why we request, send me the name and email of your panelists so we can invite them and create a unique link to that particular person with the necessary privilege for his or her participation. Thank you.
Hey, Steve.
I got
I'd love to
something
hear
to say.
from you. We gotta unmute Steve.
Hello?
Yeah, you're on
So,
mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So at my committee here meeting last week, I heard from Mark Levine as the meeting was already underway that he wanted to call in and participate. So I guess I made the mistake of forwarding to him my email that had a specific code that was only meant for me. And during the course of this meeting, a couple of times I faded out and lost connection. He lost connection. It was really haphazard. So is there a mechanism if something like this happens in the middle of a meeting where I didn't know ahead of time that he would be calling in? how do I give him his own ID number or whatever it is?
All he
Probably the best thing to do is the email that we send to the public that people complaining about. That's the second email that have the general ID to anyone to enter. The person will enter as an attendee and will let you know, and you can make that person as a co-host or panelist, whatever is needed to do.
Okay. So I'm sorry, he entered, what was the word you used? He enters as what?
The attendee, the
Attendees.
attendee.
And you will find that on the second email that is sent out in the invitation. When we blast it, we send it to the general public.
He enters as a D?
Attendee,
Attendee.
A-T-E-N-D-E-E, attendee, and you can promote an attendee into a panelist.
Okay, I got it. Okay. All right, so that's what we'll do in the future.
Okay,
one final
Steve.
thing, Ellie, in that order that Steve was saying. Steve, the email that we receive as a panelist, we have not, we should not share it. We don't need, we don't have to share with any other because it's going to happen the same we already spoke.
Okay, I learned my lesson.
And that's why we still need to send the public email that Ebenezer and Paula sent this afternoon, because some people, when we set up the meeting, all panelists, even though they are described on the meeting when the meeting is created, some of you guys still keep saying that you don't receive the panelist email. And that's why the second email, which is the general email for attendees, still we need to include all of you guys in order to prevent.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah. Am I unmuted?
Yeah, Steve, you can start your committee report.
Okay, I'm going to do my best to keep it within 5 minutes, but I had a lot of packed into that meeting. I think I had 7 different speakers, and I had representatives of each of the healthcare institutions. I had a report from the health department. We had Councilmember Levine, as I just mentioned. We had EMS, and we had a representative from the New York State Nurses Association. From the health department, we got the latest statistics on as of last Thursday. It's obviously much higher. It's higher now, but as of last Thursday, there were 117,000 deaths in New York City as a result of COVID-19. And in our 4 zip codes, I don't have a breakdown of the number of deaths, but I do have a breakdown of the number of positive COVID-19 cases. And the zip code at 132 has the greatest number of positive cases as of last Thursday, 857. Then zip code 33 has 735, zip code 40, 576, and then zip code 34, 399. And I will ask the health department to continue to update us. At the Columbia Medical Center, the 4th year class, medical school class graduated 1 month early last Wednesday. We're told that a significant number of the members of that class are now working at the hospital. We got a pretty thorough overview of the COVID-19 situation. One thing I just want to point out is that the medical center is now doing clinical trials on the president's favorite drugs, hydroxychloroquine and erythromycin. And the medical director at the hospital told us that he does not recommend that those drugs be used right now by people outside of the clinical trials. Should not be used, should not be considered a cure for COVID-19. The operating rooms in the hospital, by the way, for the most part, I'm told, have now been converted into ICUs. And the representative from the Nurses Association refers to it as being maybe the largest ICU in the city. In terms of the hospital, the field hospital at Baker Field opened last Thursday and began accepting patients. patients being referred there are those with milder symptoms who do not require, I guess, the ICU and more high degree of treatment in the regular hospital. The hospital asked that we continue to promote virtual urgent care, that people who would normally come to the ER or try to get to see their doctors utilize the telehealth phone numbers and try to have their appointments made through the internet. They're going to be putting out PSAs in both English and Spanish, promoting that idea. I asked for statistics on the number of patients, COVID-19 patients, that have been treated at both 168th Street and in Allen. And for some reason, the hospital seems to be very reticent to provide any statistics. The one thing that I was told is that throughout the whole system, throughout the whole New York Presbyterian Hospital system, which of course extends all over the city and outside the city, they've had 2,400 patients. They have moved various services out of the Allen, including pediatrics, maternity, and the psych unit, in order to make room for COVID-19 patients. I asked for a commitment that the psych unit in particular be returned to the Allen Hospital once this crisis subsides, and I got maybe a semi-commitment to that effect. Councilmember Levine gave us a very thorough and I thought lucid summation of where things stand right now. Among other things, I think he pointed out that the final death toll when it is going to end up being much higher than what's being said these days when we find out how many people have really passed away. And he pointed out that the city amended its numbers last week to include not only those who are where COVID-19 is listed on their death certificates, but also where the cause of death is not known, but where COVID-19 is strongly suspected as being the cause. And so our New York City statistics in one day jumped by 3,800 deaths. We also had a presentation from the fire department on behalf of EMS. As you probably know, the call volume for EMS is at this point at historic highs, 5,000 to 6,000 calls per day, although at the end of last week it was coming down. I asked for specifics concerning our base station 13 at 172nd Street and the 5 or so ambulances that it puts out every day, and hopefully I'll be getting that information in the next few days. The representative from the New York State Nurses Association indicated that they still have concerns about the supply of protective equipment for the nurses. They're especially concerned about the staffing ratios in the ICUs, where normally it would be one nurse for each patient or for every 2 patients, and now it's at times it can be one nurse for every 4 or 5 patients. They also have a concern about the assignment of high-risk nurses who have underlying conditions who could be susceptible to COVID-19, and they're trying to make accommodations for those nurses. Nurses for the first time are now being tested at the hospital. And what was a surprise, I think, to many of us is that we were told that some of the nurses who are wearing their scrubs in the subways or buses have actually been getting negative reaction from the public. I guess people who are afraid that maybe they would be spreading the virus. Oh, and let me not leave out Isabella. Betty, of course, gave a report about Isabella. At this point, they're taking the temperatures of every staff person at the beginning of every shift. And if somebody leaves the building and then comes back, they take their temperature again. They had an issue with having adequate supply of PPE, and with the help of local elected officials and the hospital, they got 2 shipments at the end of last week. They probably still need more PPE. But at least the immediate crisis they had, I think, was somewhat alleviated. They've had 1 staff death, and there was a state report that came out at the end of last week indicating that 13 patients have died at Isabella. You may know that they had to bring in a refrigerator truck because the morgue they have in the building can only accommodate 4 bodies. So there is a refrigerated truck that's parked outside the building. I think that gives you the highlights of what happened at my meeting. I just want to mention one other thing that Councilmember Levine mentioned. When we asked him what's going to happen next, what do we look forward to in this crisis, and his point was that if we get down to maybe 500 cases per day, at that point, if we can start identifying and testing people and tracing their prior contacts, in his words, we can tiptoe back to normal life. But we have to have broad testing and tracing, and we probably have to start testing, maybe 100,000 people per day. And right now, we're only testing maybe 1/10 of that. So I'm going to invite him back at the next meeting, I think it's May the 7th, as the first Thursday, and I'll be inviting back all of the same speakers, I think, from the last meeting, and to get further updates on the COVID-19 situation in our community. That's my report.
Wow, Steve, that
Thank you,
was very
Steve.
sobering.
Yeah.
May I have a question for Steve?
Yeah, go ahead, Faye.
Thank you. Thank you, Steve, for your report. I wanted to ask you, what was the first thing that you mentioned about graduation with Columbia? I didn't catch that detail.
Their medical students, their medical school students graduated last week, 1 month early, so that many of them could start working as doctors. And a significant number of those graduates are now in the hospital working.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a great news. I'm wondering how exactly that graduation happened, but that's very interesting, and that's a great news, of course.
Yeah, the other schools in Columbia are going to still have their regular graduation at the end of May, and the dental school, et cetera. But the medical school graduated early.
Do you know if any other school like NYU and Cornell probably have done the same thing as well?
I believe they have. I'm pretty sure NYU has, and most likely if Columbia did it, so did Cornell.
Yeah, sounds like it. Yeah. Well, that's a great news. All right. Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Faye. I'm gonna move on to, unless someone else has another question. Domingo, I see you raising your hand. You're the only person that's raised their hand. Domingo? Domingo, you have a question related to Steve's report? Domingo? I guess you'll ask that later. Domingo, can you hear me?
You hear me?
Okay, yeah, now I can hear you. Yeah, you had a question on Steve's report?
Yeah, it was more around the whole, I forgot, Isabella. So from my understanding, I actually got some information around that the PPE situation is still pretty bad over there. They still lack a lot of supplies, and that they did reach out to elected officials, and that they still haven't received enough to be able to even provide their doctors with PPE.
Well, I haven't. Is Betty on this call?
No, I haven't seen Betty in
I
neither.
spoke to somebody from Isabella, one of the doctors there that I know. I spoke to her yesterday, and she said that what they're seeing over there is certain individuals that have, and they're still wondering how some people get PPE and some didn't. Like, that was what I got.
Yeah, well, Betty told us at this meeting that for some reason OEM classified nursing homes as being in a lesser need than hospitals for PPE. And even though nursing homes are one of the hot spots where people are coming down with this virus and dying, apparently they have not been given priority nationally for the PPE. Let me talk to. I'm going to talk to Betty and to the hospital. The hospital may actually have more than an adequate supply at this point. I'm told that they've been getting a lot of PPE delivered, so maybe they can continue to help out Isabella.
Thank you, Steve. Guess Domingo. Thank you. That was an excellent point. Guess we can get help from any of us that have contacts. Unless someone else has another question or observation or point to make, I'm gonna move on to Debbie, who has the next on the agenda. You had something else to say, Steve?
Yeah, I just remembered, I did get a phone call from one of our past community board members, Arlene Schulman, who told me that she had gotten a call from somebody who was going to be donating 100 masks to Isabella. So hopefully that delivery was arranged tonight.
It's great news. Hopefully they're N95s.
No, they're not. But
Oh.
I don't think they need. Oh no, I'm sorry. They are. Yes, they
They
are
are?
N95s. Yes.
That's it. That saves our day. Debbie, I know that you've been eager.
Thanks, Eli.
Okay.
So our committee actually has a reso item, but haven't had a chance to write up the reso. So I'm going to go through that, and then I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with our agenda for May. So the DOT came this month, and they presented something that I thought might relate to the crisis and giving us better access to parks. But I was wrong about that, but it still had to do with access to parks. And here's what it was. The DOT needed approval for a prospective project that will improve our access to Fort Washington Park and also generally improve things for pedestrians walking on Riverside Drive, north of 165 and south of the bridge, in that area with all the exit and entrance ramps, both for the Henry Hudson and the entrance to the bridge. I guess that's Trans-Manhattan Expressway, etc. So as people know, it's really, so I think part of the impetus of this came from the Parks Department, because there's so few ways to get down into Fort Washington Park. As everybody pretty much knows on this call, you can get in from 181 and you can get in from further south, like south of 161st, but the theoretical entrances, like around 172nd Street in that area, 169th, I sort of think of as like an urban myth, but they exist, but you have to kind of navigate these highway entrances and exits. And so the proposal here was about improving all those places where you have to, as a pedestrian on Riverside Drive, potentially trying to get into the park, you have to navigate all these the exit ramps from the northbound and southbound Henry Hudson, but also the entrance ramp where you go in to get on the bridge or get on the Cross Bronx, etc. And so it's a little hard. The presentation actually had some visuals that were helpful, but so people that are often in a car can sort of might be able to picture it. But these are all intersections that by and large don't have a crosswalk. They definitely don't have a proper pedestrian ramp in the curb cuts. And there's even situations where like you don't have a sidewalk to walk on, like there's kind of like a median that's like dirt and tufts of grass, but it's part of the way that you would walk, and there's not even like a sidewalk there. So this does all the logical things to improve also the safety, because obviously you're crossing streets that have exiting and entering highway traffic, and so the cars are behaving as if they're driving on a highway or entering a highway, and not as if they are on a city street. So that's basically it. It's crosswalks, it's sidewalk, it's pedestrian ramps for the sidewalks, and a little bit of the sort of sidewalk extension work. So that'll be, you know, I'll have for the general meeting. And then also, we never actually ended up voting on the resolution that I presented last month. So we will be voting on both of those in the subsequent general. So with that, let me talk a little bit about our agenda. So what we had on the agenda was the long month after month delay of safety improvements for the Riverside Oval, which has been, you know, at issue because of how dangerous it is and how many people have gotten seriously injured. And then that's sort of a presentation that was sort of meant to happen since maybe January. And also potentially like an update on the viaduct work, which is sort of, I guess, going along. And then the Riverside Oval is sort of a to be confirmed because there are concerns now that, you know, with the potential for so many projects to be project construction, just we don't know when DOT construction can start. We don't know what city budget cuts are going to mean to DOT scheduled projects, etc. There's just sort of some complexities to, like, does DOT come if they have no assurance of it getting, that it would be like shovel in the ground this year. So we're having some discussions. In a perfect world, I would like to see them at least just come and just give it like a high level overview, if not pitching the whole project, of where their thinking was on making that area safer. Now, but the bigger thing that has come up, as some of you may know, is the expansion of City Bike into northern Manhattan is something that's sort of been happening and then was sort of meant to be rolled out come the summer, or maybe a little after. CB12 was, I think, going to come a little bit after CB9, 10, and 11, if I have my facts right. And with this crisis, there is really a lot of pressure to accelerate any new, you know, expansion of City Bike locations, because so many people, essential workers, are needing to get to work, preferably in a way other than the subway. So a week ago Tuesday, an emergency temporary location was opened at the hospital at New York Presby. But basically, you know, there's just sort of a feeling, I think, from the top at DOT, as well as from the council member Rodriguez, who's the chair of the transportation committee, of like, can we get this expedited, that which was sort of already being planned. So with that, DOT and Citibank would like to come to the May 4th Traffic and Transportation Committee meeting and give a proper give the full on sort of what the thinking is now on locations, but collect the critical community board and public feedback on those locations. So that is May 4th. And then, you know, meaning at the May meeting, general meeting, then we would be in a position to sort of update the general public who may not have been at the Traffic and Transportation Committee about what is happening. So, so that's going to be happening. And then obviously people should, I mean, I know we're always mindful of each other's meetings, etc., but help promote that. Obviously in this virtual environment, you know, we want to make sure that we've got people aware of the meeting and able to attend if they're interested.
Okay.
And then I would just say the last piece on the agenda is, so I see this BSA request. I haven't really gotten to look at it. I mean, if they've done a traffic study, then they can come. I mean, they're gonna, I would put them after the city bike stuff. But if they don't have the traffic study, then I'm not looking to, you know, I'm not, that's how I would that's how I would add them to the agenda. I'm not going to do it if it's not, they don't have something to say about that.
Okay.
And so, yeah, that's it for me.
Oh, that's it for you. Okay, Deb. Thank you so much for all the information that you just provided for us. Isidro?
So we understand that this crisis obviously is something that we were not expecting. And it makes sense for some residents to have access to bike, especially in this type of environment. I'll be cautious though that some city bikes, if there is a request, that we be careful where we place them. For one thing, I will hope that Dykeman is completely not a discussion on it, because already we have too many issues with it. But you know, I'm sure when that time comes, you will let us know, and there'll be questions there. Thank you.
Well, Isidro, I mean, the May meeting will be the opportunity for us to give that input. So I have made note of that point. And I think that, you know, DOT, I think gets that point that communities, all communities, but certainly CB12, expects to and has a lot of input about where we think it makes sense in our context and where we don't think it makes sense. And so, you know, everybody, you know, again, anybody that has ideas one way or another, if you can attend, great. Otherwise, so, you know, I take your point and or just get to me or get to Omar, and then we'll just, you know, just so we have it all in front of us when we have that meeting. And I would also say that, you know, one thing I've requested is that they give us information, which I think is part of their presentation, about, like, I actually don't know how much it costs to take a city bike and how that compares to a Metro card. I don't consider a Metro card very affordable, so I don't know. But I do think that that's also part of this, because it helps us think about, like, who's this for and who's gonna kind of, you know, be able to use this or not use it, you know. Okay, now I'll stop.
All right, thank you. And I was also part of the conversation, Isidro, and I think they were very open as to get data enough to know what areas have been underutilized or overutilized. They're gonna come back and they're gonna, as remember, correct me if I'm wrong, Debbie, and do a serious study as to, you know, what areas they're gonna come back to and re-examine the success or not, or lack thereof of the bike situation.
And, you know, but one thing people need to note, I know I keep saying I'm going to stop talking, but I'm not quite there yet, is that this is a process that's begun. I mean, the public has had an opportunity to, in a sense, put push pins in locations that are requested. So what we don't know is, and I assume they'll present, is like, where did all those pins go? And I think Omar Tejada is listening to this, and this isn't the time to discuss it, but he was at some of those, so I think he probably has visibility on, you know, where the people had sort of put their push pin in of, like, do one here, do one there. And it doesn't mean they're not just like taking orders like hamburgers, but it is good to know. But again, to Isidro's point and to Eli's point, there's also this other part of it, whether we like it or not, is besides having locations where some people might think it's a great spot, we have a lot to say on places that just don't make sense. So, May 4th.
Thanks. So moving right along to Isidro. I think you're the next one in line for your report.
Okay, so as you know, licensing, which was supposed to meet on Monday, April 6th, we were not able to meet because of the crisis. We had originally thought about moving the license meeting from a Wednesday to a Monday. That didn't happen. And that was too because of the Jewish holiday. So my thing now is for Ebenezer and the staff to start gathering the data that perhaps we had for April to see if all of them can be accommodated for May so that we can proceed to entertain those requests for licenses, be it renewal, be it change to a method of operation, and I will hope new ones. It's amazing that, you know, at this time of the year, I'm actually praying for new licenses and developments coming to Northern Manhattan. But because of the economic crisis that we are confronting, I'm hoping for new licenses. I mean, let's see what happens. But that's something that we can discuss later. Since there were no licenses discussed this month, I have had taken my time, and I have approached close to 70 local restaurants, bars, and lounges to find out precisely how they have been able to survive and what type of plans they have tried to apply. Most overwhelmingly, the most concern relies with the SBA. Out of 37 merchants that I have spoken thus far, only 2 of them have gotten the SBA, 2 out of 37. So it's very concerning. I'm trying to put together a group with the community board and local stakeholders to see perhaps how we can discuss this problem and perhaps have a meeting or teleconference meeting, Debbie, with our congressman, because I understand that it was recently approved that there will be another wave of the SBA that was going to be approved for the small merchants. As you all know, Shake Shack got $10 million. There were other chains that got or received $30 million. Yet for the Northern Manhattan restaurant industry, only 2 that I've known have gotten this SBA loan. That's unacceptable. So I'm trying to see, and I made contacts with the Restaurant Association of New York. I'm going to have a discussion with them pretty soon as well. And the idea is to have a chat with our local congressman and also call for a press conference. This is not acceptable. I'm going to continue to be reaching out to all the restaurants that I have on my list. You know, some of them I cannot reach out because I don't have a personal number. But I'm doing my best to reach out to every single one and find out what type of assistance they have gotten and where they're at in the process. With that, you know, I close and I'll open up for any questions that you might have.
Domingo, you were raising your hand.
Uh,
Is there anyone else? But I
Yeah.
only saw Domingo raising his
You hear
hand.
me?
Yeah, now I can hear you.
Yeah, I think it's extremely important that when we do these efforts, that everybody plays their role into and understands their lanes, right? So I just want to have an understanding of what Isidro's doing versus what the Small Business Development Committee's doing, what hat he's wearing, which call he's making, you know what I'm saying? Because in times like these, it's not about fragmenting efforts, it's about everybody coming together and doing something in collaboration. As far as the whole SBA, that's a concern that should have been known prior to. Unfortunately, there was a lack of advocacy, and you see a result as the one that we got, where the vast majority of people who received these funds were these big corporations. Like, for instance, Shake Shack was shamed to the point where they actually are returning the $10 million they received. You know, so there's a lot of things that taken place, but I think we're beyond just simple conversations. The time for conversations has passed. I think we need tangible solutions and actionable steps moving forward. So yes, as I understand all these phone calls, all these talkings, all these people wanting to come out on live and talking the same. I think our businesses are tired of that at this point. I think we have to identify what's next, what legislation is next, how could people advocate for these legislations. It's not about fragmented work where I don't know if you're wearing your bid hat or you're wearing your licensing hat, but at this point, like when it goes beyond that, we have to have a conversation on how we could work together and do a similar work through the Small Business Development Committee, because I'm assuming the name speaks for itself. And yeah, so I think it's extremely important that we actually, instead of fracturing these conversations, we're not just out here just talking. Let's identify tangible steps. If the congressman has something in mind that he is doing, because SBA, whatever the bailout plan for small businesses were, it wasn't clearly defined. There was a lot of vagueness in the language, and therefore a lot of corporations exploited that and took advantage of that, while our small businesses were supposed to feel the trickle down, and the trickle down were just little basic drops of water, you know. So I think it's extremely important that we focus on that, you know, and let's move beyond these conversations. And
Domingo, I think that you well know that no one can be allowed to speak for the board, and I will not speak on behalf of the board if I don't have written approval from the president of the board. So that's one thing. I will always wear my bid hat because we do have an investment in Inwood. So let's just make that clear. No one can speak on behalf of the board unless they have very clear permission.
I'm not asking for technical terms. What I
him.
said was I provided a recommendation. That's what I
what
did.
I feel, because, you know,
Yeah.
oh, and I didn't
But
interrupt you, right?
I think that before you move forward, because I want a response from Isidro. I think you made a point of to ask what hat he's wearing, and he was beginning to kind of like answer you that he was wearing, like, I guess you said the big hat, right? So that you can do a brief response and we can move forward.
It is the bid hat because for me to speak on behalf of the board, I got to get permission from you, Eli. Okay. So it's always a bid hat, Domingo, and I do have an investment in Inwood.
Oh no, I was just for clarification purposes, because this was the licensing committee report, so that's why I got it confused. Sorry about that.
All right, point well taken.
I would just like to say that as a consumer of this conversation, I understood, as it turns out incorrectly, I understood Isidro's comments to be in the context of the licensing committee report and in his role as the licensing committee chair. So I would just like to suggest that if, at a minimum, both Domingo and I misunderstood the characterization of your comments, then it would be well advised for you, Isidro, to always preface any comments like that by saying at the beginning, I am speaking in my capacity as the bid chair, and that, or bid executive director, and then it just removes any potential for confusion.
Thank you, Liz. Point well taken. Apologize if there was any misunderstanding. The report on the licensing ended when there was no licenses to be reported on, and I should have made that clarification. So
I would also just further state, at the risk of being out of my lane here, that because this is a Community Board 12 Executive Committee meeting, the bid report and your opinion as the executive director of the bid actually has no place here.
Those businesses that you see waiting to be open, they should be a concern for this community board, and I'll raise it at any time that I see it fit.
Okay, and I'm gonna end it there. So I'm gonna end it there. Domingo, thank you for your comments, candid comments. Isidro, your response was valid. Unless you have a question, Steve, I want to move on and move along with the rest of the agenda.
I just have a comment. I joined the meeting late, so I don't know whether anyone else.
Is this a reference to Isidro's point, or his?
Yes, yeah. Well, it's in regard to the fact that we've lost now one of our restaurants, which is not surviving the COVID-19 crisis.
We discussed it at length.
Okay, very good.
Okay, thank you. Lisa already gave hers. Ariel, Mr. Miranda, you're next.
Can I just, there was one quick thing that I wanted to, that I forgot from my Parks Committee report, and this actually
Thank you for raising your hand.
I did. This involves Steve. Steve?
Yeah.
Steve, so yeah. I've gotten a lot of questions both at my meeting and general pushback from the community about dog runs. and if there's anything that can be done with, because I know dog runs are closed, but people are having concerns about social distancing, walking dogs, and what to do around that. And I'm just wondering if there's anything that can be done through Parks Enforcement in terms of possibly reopening dog runs so that people can exercise their dogs safely.
Well, I'll check, but I haven't heard anything about it being reconsidered.
Okay, that's a
Okay.
conversation between the Parks Department and the Parks employee. Ariel?
Hi, all. So I just want to say, first of all, thank you so much, Jonathan. I mean, you've been just incredible help so far. We definitely would not be able to have these meetings without your help. So again, thank you so much. To my committee members, I want to say thank you for spending so much time with me. I know we kind of had a very long meeting this past month. It was definitely needed. However, as we discussed, there was so much of really just a need in services throughout our entire community, our state. Mainly having to do a lot with really just the rise in unemployment, really dealing with the concerns of people not necessarily being able to make rent, individuals that are applying for specific public assistance and other benefits that might very well aid them in this time of crisis. What I started the meeting off by mentioning to them was that I wanted to make sure that we did focus on addressing the rise in unemployment, addressing the needs of small and mid-sized landlords often responsible for overseeing our affordable housing, making sure that we focused on those individual New York renters who may very well not be paying rent. What was in March now will, of course, continue into April. And of course, trying to really take some time to start talking about the needs of our immigrant community members. What we ended up doing was actually passing a resolution that was very much so focused on a lot of the things that we brought up. I had shared in the weeks following up to our meeting a number of articles that had been focusing a lot on what people were talking about at the state level. Unfortunately, our city legislature was not able to enact much, given that they had to close. The state legislature has now also had to close. The concern at the very meeting that I had brought up to a lot of these members was that because there was a concern for, or rather a desire to try and move along the budget on the state level as soon as possible and potentially end the session, which they eventually did. I had wanted to make sure that we discussed at length a bit more what was State Senator Gianaris's bill. It is S1825A, essentially ensuring that we could promote the use of our funds, making sure that people were not necessarily being really burdened with the need to pay rent, that those small and essentially mid-sized landlords could then defer the costs onto really the banks. These were kind of the biggest issues I think that was just so very necessary to bring up. The bill had already gotten 23 sponsors by the time we had begun to speak about it. Of course, we know that we needed 32 so as to make sure that it could actually pass the state Senate and then move forward onto the governor. Of course, the governor has been really resilient to try and make sure that we spoke about really what's going to happen with a lot of New York renters, a lot of individuals that particularly will not necessarily be receiving the benefits of the moratorium that he has given to some homeowners, and really just what's the concern about a lot of people that are not necessarily living in rent-regulated apartments as well. One of the things that I'll also just point out, Aisha actually highlighted, was that, for those individuals that don't live in these rent-regulated units, a lot of our really just New York landlords can take advantage of at this moment is price gouging. We've heard so much about it really within the healthcare sector. One of the things that we've also been seeing in the news now is that landlords are actually taking advantage of the fact that there are healthcare workers coming from across the country, which is actually building on demand. And so they're trying to actually evict some of their own tenants so as to make sure they can boost up the rent in the next lease to someone that would be willing to pay 25% or higher, which is, just an incredibly immoral act. And so we've tried to make sure that we address it in the resolution. One of the things I actually want to try and do right now is just quickly share with everyone the resolution that we passed. I think it's just beneficial so that you can all see. I'll quickly just show
Question?
you. Sorry, I just want to make sure that everyone can see. I'll read it off very quickly. Whereas the State Department of Labor reported there were 7.8 million calls by New Yorkers seeking unemployment benefits last week and 80,000 files for unemployment in the week ending March 21st. And whereas New York University's Furman Research Center stated that roughly 1/3 of the 3.2 million households in New York City draw their primary income from someone who is vulnerable to income loss. And whereas 34% of workers in the city are at risk of losing income, and about 48% of Hispanic wage earners, 38% of Black wage earners, as well as 35% of Asian or Pacific Islander wage earners were in vulnerable occupations in 2018. And whereas Governor Andrew Cuomo a moratorium on mortgage payments, asking renters to pay back landlords after the 90 days are done, which only causes further deferred financial distress and does not provide relief to renters. And whereas the New York Times is reporting, based on a recent survey from Property Nest, that about 40% of renters could potentially not be paying rent if they lost their job due to the pandemic. And whereas 90,000 people have already signed on to the Right to Counsel petition to not pay rent. And whereas the Department of Health community profile shows that 53% of Community District 12 was rent burdened, 20% were living in poverty, and 12% were unemployed in 2018. And whereas due to the increased rate of the public applying for unemployment insurance, there will be an increase in the likelihood of people accessing public benefits such as public assistance, SNAP, Medicaid, and SSI. And whereas residents of our community will likely be impacted by income loss and unemployment beyond the 90-day period, therefore be it resolved. Manhattan Community Board 12 is in support of State Senator Michael Gianaris' bill S1825A to suspend rent payments for 90 days. And be it resolved, Manhattan Community Board 12 is in support of forgiving utilities bills accrued during the pandemic. And be it resolved, Manhattan Community Board 12 is in support of increasing funds available for human services across the city, including unemployment insurance, Medicaid, and SSI. And be it resolved, Manhattan Community Board 12 is in support of protections for market rate renters so that landlords cannot price gouge rent, so as to displace rent. And lastly, be it resolved, Manhattan Community Board 12 is in support of protections being instituted so as to instantly give lease renewals in the midst of a pandemic. So clearly, it is a lot we discussed. I'm so just generally thankful for my fellow committee members who are willing to spend the time to really craft this resolution. Of course, we want to hear from as many individuals across the board. And we just want to say thank you again for really just doing what you already are in your own respective boards and committees. Thank you. Sorry, and I'll open up, yes, for questions.
I have a question.
Yep.
This is Faye.
Yes?
Yes, for who? For Faye or for who? Hello?
Hi.
Sorry, who are you acknowledging?
Yeah, yes, sorry, I'm also realizing you're on your phone instead. Faye, yes, I was referring to you.
Well, thank you definitely for this report. It's a lot to digest. But one thing that captivated my attention among many is about the price gouging, which is, I heard the mayor saying that, or encouraging people to report, any incidents that people, may come across. And I know that in our community, this is happening big time. There are stores like 99 cents a
Different
store.
kind of price gouging, Faye.
Excuse me?
It's
Sorry.
a different kind of price gouging, Faye. That's an important concern, but the price gouging that you're talking about is a very different
No,
kind of
I haven't finished. I haven't finished my thought. What I wanted to say is that acknowledging that problem, because this is a big problem which I personally had experience and some of my friends or neighbors, what I wanted to ask is, what exactly in precise they are doing about that? Is the mayor sending inspectors to these stores? Because over here in my area, this is happening like on a daily basis. I noticed that a simple hand lotion that used to be for $2.29, they selling for $10, and this is really ridiculous. Supermarket as well. Some of the milk, like Carnation milk and stuff like that, they have raised the price tremendously. So I'm wondering if they are sending an inspector, you know, to these sites to really investigate those businesses, because they really abusing the customers. So is the mayor sending inspector to you know, in our community? That is my question. He's aware of that, or he knows anything, or I don't know. But I think maybe the board may wanted to consider it, to pound on this, and perhaps even passing a resolution, because to me, this is a very serious matter. It's like people getting robbed, you know, on a daily basis, and that's really unfair.
So Ariel, so do you have any knowledge as to what phase question is? And if you do not, you can always say that you're going to look into it, or whatever answer you have, so we can then have Domingo, who's next, and have Curtis, who's been waiting on the sidelines for his next report.
Okay, can I speak on that too?
Yeah, well, as soon as I go through the order that I just.
I'm actually next on the agenda, public safety.
Okay.
So I'll just say, I mean, I cannot necessarily speak as much in length. I would not say I'm an expert in the very area of what's happening with price gouging for cleaning products, particularly. What I do know is that there has been definitely a ramp up in enforcement in a number of areas. But yeah, I wouldn't be able to say anything more to it.
Okay. Domingo, then Steve. Domingo 1.
You hear me?
2. Oh, now I can hear you.
Yeah, so Ariel, great job on the resolution. And I was just tapping into what Fe said. The price gouging is usually led by the distributors. So a lot of these distributors are also exploiting the situation and increasing the price, which often leads to some of these small businesses increasing it. I had that conversation with the guy from my deli, and he said, yeah, but he was selling a hand sanitizer for $5, but he's like, the distributor that distributed to him also increased the price, and therefore for him to be able to make profit out of it, he had to also increase it as well. I just wanted to put that up there.
But if I may, just quickly, may I say something very, very quickly?
Of course, Free.
Thank you. I just wanted to say that the same cream that it used to be for $2.29, I think it was. The following day they had it for, at one occasion they had it for $8. The next day they had it for $10. So in between, I don't know how the supplier could possibly increase the price, because from one day, to the next day, $2 in addition to the $8. I think this is ridiculous.
Okay. Thank you, Steve, so that I could make a point and kind of like guide Faye into something that I already experienced, and I had to file a complaint against someone. Steve.
I just want to say that my understanding is that the city is sending out inspectors in response to complaints about price gouging, and has cited some businesses. So rather than pass a resolution, I think if we know of any cases where we suspect price gouging is taking place, we should call 311 and report it. Let the city respond. We can't, rather than talk about it in theory. I'd like to ask Ariel, with respect to this resolution, it was a little difficult to follow it, so would appreciate it if you could email it to us. And is there an assembly companion bill for Genaris's bill?
Yes, and sorry if I didn't mention. So if I'm remembering correctly, I think, and Bruce also mentioned the exact assembly member. I think it was Assembly Member Yulene. She had, I think, submitted the accompanying bill, and I mean, if you'd like, I can try and send it to you, on a one-off. But yeah, if you go just onto the New York Senate website.
What's the number of the Senate bill?
The Senate bill is S1825A.
All right, but if there is in fact an assembly companion bill, then the resolution should refer to both. Could you explain a little bit about the meaning of the last resolve clause about lease renewals?
Yeah, so that's actually as well dealing with really what is just another another absurd action being taken by some landlords. So it's, kind of in that instance where I was just mentioning that there's a landlord that would like to make sure that people are being pushed out of their homes. They're really not trying to, at this time, those individuals at least, give the renewal because they do want to make sure that they can get in another tenant that then would then be able to, provide 25% or so more in the rent.
So that's a reference then to market rate apartments where the lease would be up for renewal, but the landlord is refusing to do it. Is that the point?
Yeah.
I don't think that's the right bill number. I'm looking at 1825A, and that's not the right bill.
Ariel, why don't you just use her email, just forward it the actual resolution, so maybe she can kind of like copy it directly from the email itself or from the resolution itself, so that she can follow through. Anyways, we're gonna have to pass it in the next general meeting for vote. So it's always, like Steve said, it's always good to have it distributed out. Curtis, to the next report.
All right.
Unless Steve, are you finished? Because I really want to move on and have.
Well, it was this. Well, when you send me the resolution, I can point out what I think the problem might be with that other clause.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
It's 8125. Steve, it's 8125.
What is the Assembly bill?
The Senate bill is 8125, and there doesn't appear to be an Assembly same as.
Oh, well, then the resolution should call upon our Assembly members to introduce a companion bill.
Curtis?
All righty. Thank you very much. So just a few brief updates. We had a very successful online meeting. Unfortunately, the technology failed. It wasn't recorded. So I've received notes from the presenters who came about their key points, and I'm going to be reconstructing with my committee some of the meeting minutes. So the 34th precinct did attend, and Brian Croak, Officer Croak, did share with us that at the time of the meeting, there were a substantial amount of officers who were out because of COVID-19. Unfortunately, there were 40 officers and a few others who had tested positive, and they were out for longer periods. And the other 40 were just displaying symptoms. So that was a big blow to the precinct. Obviously, the month before, I did share with you all that there was a substantial amount of officers at the 33rd precinct who were also out. Officer Croak did share with us that commercial burglaries were their biggest concern, their biggest issue. They had recently deployed additional resources and tours to check on commercial establishments, as well as connect with the Patrol Borough Task Force to have additional resources at particular locations in the 34th precinct. There continues to be a pattern of GLAs, which is the grand larceny auto. We've seen over the past few months, according to their reports, a pattern of people stealing cars that are unloading material in front of stores. There have been cases recently of situations where cars have been stolen. So this continues to be a concern for the precinct. Both precincts, the 34th and the 33rd, presented cases and their concern for this continued thing, as well as the commercial burglaries. There's also been a continuation of package thefts in both areas. We initially, were shared the sentiment that those numbers could go down because people are home and they can pick up their packages, but apparently people are indoors and not going out to their mailboxes at the exact time that the postal deliveries and Amazon deliveries are coming, and the pattern remains. Amazon's just dropping things off and not knocking on doors, unfortunately, because of their concern for health reasons as well. Although people are home to receive the packages, so that's a trend. Other than those data points, we did discuss in great detail the issue pertaining to public safety on Rikers Island for the incarcerated population there. And we did pass a resolution in support of the release of those who are most vulnerable, those 50 and over, those who are incarcerated on technicalities, meaning they missed a parole date, they were late for a meeting, and they're just locked up because of those minor infractions, and those who are serving low-level offenses. So the resolution supports the release of those incarcerated people, and it also calls for the city to invest in soap and sanitary stations for those who remain incarcerated to wash their hands, as well as PPE for correction officers who are going without because of the COVID disparities with PPE. So there's been a substantial amount of cases of correctional officers dying in addition to inmates being affected by this pandemic. So that's our resolution. It is written, it's ready to be sent. I'm holding off on sending it to the board because I'm expecting some of the data points to evolve between now and next week, but I'll stop whatever data points are being adjusted Friday and send it on to Ebenezer for review.
Thanks, Curtis. Before I was going to make a point, but Isidro, you had an observation or question to Curtis's point.
Thank you, Curtis, for your input. I think it's a great resolution. Just when you do have your next meeting, please do bring it to attention the 34th and 33rd precinct that we have seen an increment in graffiti. Since most of the commercial corridors have their gates down, we have seen a huge increment on graffiti.
Okay.
It is a concern that we have. And there also have been some break-in into some businesses.
Right.
And it is something that, as businesses stay closed and shut down, it is a concern because, that's the last thing that you want as a business person. Right. And I just wanted to bring it to your attention, too. So
okay.
Thank you so much for your report.
Curtis, okay. Thank you, Isidro. I was just going to say that I was just going to expand on that point.
Okay.
As soon as I get commitment and a date for a sort of like a task force between the 34th, the 33rd, and the district attorney's office, who I reached out to, Jocelyn Minaya from the DS office. We're going to have a meeting next week or this week. As soon as I get the dates, I'll show you and I'll bring you to it, and then you can take it from there because it's really under your territory so that you can, as Isidro said, if you walk past St. Nick in Adwan between 170 to 185th, where Shiva is, to 168th, you'll see, because now the businesses are closed, you'll see all of graffitis all over the gates, mainly in the 181st. Thank you, Isidro.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to reiterate that the 34th, they did say that they noticed they were aware of the commercial burglaries and they were sending out additional patrol cars to kind of monitor the area. But if you feel like there needs to be more attention, I will most certainly bring it up at our next meeting. But they did attend, and I was happy to have them there. They logged in virtually, and it worked really well. So hopefully they'll come back and be a part of our virtual meeting again next month.
Liz was raising her hand.
Yeah, I just wanted, on the last one, I just wanted to tell Steve, new is sponsoring the assembly, same as. It's 10224A. So Ariel, when you send that around, that'll be one of the changes that one of us will drop in. I also have a question that's kind of, it's more for Steve than for Curtis, but it kind of dovetails with Isidro's observation about graffiti. Is it appropriate to ask it now?
If it's for this presentation, yes, for the Curtis's points.
No, it's actually back to Steve. It's about sanitation and trash.
So
okay,
yeah,
so I'm gonna move forward, and then you guys can talk that out. Yeah, good.
Can I say one thing? Can I just add one thing? So Steve, as I was writing this resolution, I realized that there could have been some overlap with some of the health concerns for the incarcerated people in Rikers, and I was going to share this with you to see if you wanted to, give feedback or maybe co-author with your committee. I'm not sure if you're concerned as I am, as our committee was rather, but there are some health issues. There's been some efforts, by a variety of advocacy groups to provide those resources on Rikers for the inmate population. So if you're interested, I can share this with you in advance for you to review. But it does kind of have a small overlap with health committee. I think it may.
Okay, I appreciate that. And forward it to me, and I'll see if I can provide some input on it.
Okay.
But actually, I'm very concerned about the point that Isidro just made about break-ins in stores, and this is, I think, the last thing we need is it's worse enough that these stores are closed, but to see that they're being broken into and that our streets are going to look like a vandalized zone is just awful.
Yeah.
I would appreciate it if Isidro has some specifics on this, that we we communicate this to the police tomorrow. I mean, with all due
Yes,
respect to
as I just said, Steve, there is a task force that is forming between the 34th, the 33rd, and the district attorney's office, headed
the
by
taco man.
Jocelyn Minaya. They're gonna get together with some of the public safety and us, the community board, and we're gonna try and do prevention and walk through the problem, and then they're gonna make an announcement as to how they're gonna approach this issue moving forward.
Very good. It has to be given the highest priority. So last thing we need.
Okay, thanks. Domingo, you have questions, and then we're gonna a question, and then we're gonna move to Wayne's report.
Okay, just FYI, there's a police shared a palm card that shows best practices on how to be able to prevent a lot of these burglaries that I could share with everybody whoever needs it.
Yes, thank you. Good point. And
Yes, send it to everyone.
Please.
Will do.
Okay, Wayne?
I will be very brief because land use did not meet this month. All ULURP applications and similar discretionary actions are on hold, although I have noticed as of last week, Landmarks Preservation Commission is starting to hold their public hearings virtually. So I've asked the office to be on the lookout for any applications that are land use related that come in that would require our attention. The BSA application that we were discussing earlier in this meeting is not a new application, rather it's an application that land use discussed at its February meeting, and the applicant is following up per our recommendation with other committees, but it is not a new application that came in, this month. So there was no meeting. There is no resolution coming out of land use. I will continue to monitor my email to see if there's anything that come in, and I need the office to make sure that if there's anything that's coming in, for a new BSA application or ULURP or landmarks that is going to move forward in a virtual setting, that the committee is made aware of this so that we can, make sure that we schedule accordingly.
Thank you. Gerard, you have a question? I just saw you raise your hand. Gerard. In the meanwhile, Faye, I just sent you a little copy of a link of the AG's office complaint form sent to me by courtesy of Marty Collins. Okay? Martin Collins sent it to me, so I just forwarded it to you so that you know.
Yeah, just received it. Thank you.
No problem. So I can't see Gerard. So we're gonna move ahead to Domingo, and then when Domingo finishes, then I'll get Gerard back on the phone. Domingo, if you could start.
All right. So this past month we had a event where we tried to I believe we had 157 RSVPs for the event. Approximately 88 or 90 individuals participated as attendees, and we had about 20 panelists. It was a learning experience. Why do I say that? Because it was an overwhelming amount of information, and then we try to do dual translation at the same time. I want to thank Debbie for as she wore her employee of the congressman's hat and did a good presentation around federal resources. But it was just a lot of information for the time allotted, and then on top of that, to do translations was the event went from being scheduled to an hour and a half to approximately 3 hours, but it went pretty well. What came out of that event was the importance of breaking up the event and the resources into different smaller events where, for instance, tomorrow we'll be hosting our what you need to know about commercial leases, contracts, and insurance, so that businesses understand what protections they have within their leases. And we have the Legal Aid Society, who's willing to they partnered with us for this event, and they'll be assigning a pro bono lawyers to basically consult our businesses free of cost. So understanding that times are difficult, what we should be focusing on, like I said, is action plans and being able to provide resources at the most minimal of cost or potentially free. So tomorrow the event we'll be doing, they'll be giving a broad information, and then small businesses will be able to request individual appointments so that they could be able to provide further information, and get the best legal advice they could get. And yeah, so that's one thing. It's been interesting just transitioning and getting familiarized with these systems. But besides that, I think that's all. We have about 20 businesses RSVP'd for tomorrow who are seeking this information, and yeah, that's about it.
Yes,
Question.
Isidro, yeah.
What kind of resources have you been using to invite most of the merchants of Northern Manhattan? Which stakeholders have you reached out to make sure that this word gets out? Because merchants are in dire need, and I will hope that this will be dispersed throughout the social platforms. But I'm just wondering, which stakeholders did you reach out to?
Well, since this was a follow-up to our initial event, we mainly reached out to the people on our RSVP list, which included about, like I said, 157 individuals. There's about 400 businesses in the Heights, which I feel we already have a decent reach through those RSVPs. But as far as stakeholders, we've partnered up with Legal Aid Society, and then as far as social media, which I think is something very important to speak about. Ebenezer, when somebody sends you an email, I think it's extremely important to be able to respond to it, especially when they provide you with information prior to the events and people still questioning what's going on when this information was sent out a week ago.
Okay.
Reason
Does
that
that
I
answer
asked
your question?
I do have close to 250 businesses in Washington Heights and close to 500 in Inwood. So I would have liked to share that on my social media platform so that I'll be aware.
I'll make sure that you receive it as soon as I get off the phone, Isidro. Okay.
But I did try to get this circulated, but unfortunately, since we're working from home, I'm assuming individuals have a lot to deal with in their households, or they've proven to have a lack of response.
Okay. Gerard, you had a question prior to me, and I want you to get back to your question.
Thank you, Eli. It's related to, it's kind of a Curtis and Steve question. I noticed earlier in the day that the mayor is encouraging residents to report people that aren't social distancing, people in neighborhoods that may be getting a little too close. Understandable. It may impact a lot of our businesses, a lot of our neighborhood businesses who may not be following things to the letter of the law, and now people are going to start taking pictures of, queued up lines that everybody's a little too close, or maybe it's a little too crowded. All well and good. My question to Steve and Curtis, I know we're concerned about the health of many different classes and groups of people, but what are we doing about the health and the public safety of those of us below and above ground that got to, first off, travel on trains that are probably at the worst that they've ever been? I regularly, I'm one of the honored individuals that gets to go to work regularly during the week. I've been taking the 8 train exclusively. I travel through Penn Station daily. And I can tell you, Steve, there's a health crisis in the subways in terms of filth and exposure that we have to get exposed to. Homeless, my concern with the homeless is there's a lot of emotional disturbances, and there's a lot of health issues associated there as well. That really is creating a health crisis for many of us, and many of them are healthcare workers. I look around, I see a lot of the people on trains with us are going off to work in the scrubs, you know, and they're literally, it's a concern. I mean, when you see the environment they're exposed to, there is little to no action there. Public safety, if you go through Penn Station and then get above ground, very unsafe in our community around here, around some of the train stations above ground as well. So I was just wondering if any of the two committees are focusing on health and public safety issues of just the regular people that go off to work every day or watch their children and their families. And the other issue is, big problem, motorcycles and cars, speeding is up. We were crossing Broadway on Sunday, and we're back to the 10 and 15 groups of motorcycles flying by at about 80, 90 miles an hour. While we're crossing the street, I went to tell the police car, but they were actually making a report of a car that had hit 3 to 4 cars and smashed them all. High speed, the guy had to be going, I don't know how the car that did this wasn't still there, and I'll end it with this. But there were literally 4 cars at the Dykeman House crushed into each other. That's how fast whoever was going. So we've got major public health safety issues of us and residents. I'm hoping we're talking about just the regular, you know, people that it doesn't seem we're talking about too often.
Yeah.
And, you know, the health and public safety. That's just wondering.
Yeah, I think
Wait,
there's a lot
can you just clarify what you mean by regular people?
Well, what I'm saying is, when I say regular people, I'm just saying I hear a lot of different conversations about different. Regular people. I tell you, on the train, I'm on the train with people just going off to work, Liz. So the regular people are just people going off to work, and I mentioned healthcare workers because there's a lot of healthcare workers in trains that are very dirty. There's all kinds of public. You know, I mean, God only knows. I left let's put it this way, Liz, on our last meeting, one of our board meetings, I left and I was walking down the steps of the A train, and there was a person just publicly going in the bathroom right on the platform and smoking a cigarette. So I don't have to clarify. It's just, I'm just saying, right? Crazy. I mean, hard to believe, right? So when I say regular people, it's just it's an expression. You know, everyday people on the trains, you, me, I said us, everybody on the screen. We're all on these trains.
Yeah. Thank you. I think we all get what a regular person is.
You know what I meant.
Yeah, we all know. We all know.
Thank you.
Faye, and then I'm gonna have Natalie, who's gonna give us a report, an updated report on what's going on from the Manhattan Borough's office.
Was Curtis or Steve?
Was that because I didn't hear the question. I just heard you make an observation or a comment.
My question is, you know, it's a public safety and it appears to be a public safety and health issue, and I'm just wondering, you know,
what has been happening? What's being done?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so Curtis, can you please answer it? It's okay. Sorry.
I think this touches on a variety of issues across many committees. Obviously, there's a health issue, there's a public safety issue, and there's also a transportation issue, dealing with the MTA. And from what I've heard, they have cleaning crews going in to sanitize the public transportation, and they have put in measures where you can't ride in the front of the bus, you have to ride in the back of the bus. So those are some of the low level, I guess, you know, low hanging fruit that they try to incorporate at the transit level, I think. From what I know, they've been encouraging people to continuously call 311 to report overcrowding on the train, because obviously you can't clean every piece of bacteria or virus or germ on the train. So that one thing you can do is to encourage people not to crowd the train. So unfortunately, crowding is still occurring. So what they told us in our last meeting, what I've been hearing from the press conferences, is that they're encouraging people to contact 311 when they do see or know of overcrowding, to help kind of mitigate some of those health concerns of people who are in transit. Other than that, it's just one of those issues that it's extremely challenging to resolve, and I don't have the answer.
Okay. Thank you. At least it touches around the issue.
Well, let me just say, first of all, that that I like to think that that all of the issues and all of the concerns that that I mentioned in my report basically involve regular people. I think what we're looking at is in our community, the people who are suffering from the COVID-19 are regular people. I mean, it's it's affecting people across the board to some extent. People who are Black and Hispanic to a greater extent than others, but it's affecting everybody. I also have been riding the subways, and I would agree that that there are cleanliness issues, but I'm not sure that the homeless issue is any worse than it normally is. Although I did read on Facebook that the 168th Street #1 platform is worse than normal, which is sometimes hard to imagine it the way it gets at night. But I don't know quite how to address. I mean, it's I think Curtis is right. This is what you're pointing out is largely the need for the MTA to make sure that those trains are being cleaned at least every night, at least once a day, because sometimes you wonder whether that's really happening. And they did promise at one point that they were going to be disinfecting all of those trains. So maybe that's a good question for the board to check with our MTA representative whether that's happening when they reach 207th Street. Are they being cleaned when they reach 242nd Street before they turn
No, I
around?
can tell you at
This
at
is
207th Street, there's no cleaners there anymore. And from a policing standpoint, Curtis, one of the things, and like I said, I apologize, I will try to get to these committee meetings. My question to the police would be, what is the level of policing that's possible? Because really,
Right.
as someone that rides that train pretty frequently, it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of police down below.
Well, unfortunately, they have addressed that. They said that they are, unfortunately, they are also victims to COVID-19. They're understaffed, they're under-resourced right now. The 34th had 40 guys out, and the 33rd had substantial amount of
over 140.
Yeah, so I think
tested positive.
So I think there's been a large number of those who have tested positive, and I think the last meeting I did bring this issue up to Councilmember Levine to see if there were resources being allocated to our area, or officers. Maybe there are precincts that don't have high number as we do, so seeing if they can allocate some of those resources to our area. But yes, there's a resource issue. There's a homeless issue. There's a health issue. There's every issue you can think of just kind of colliding, and
it's a perfect storm.
It's a perfect storm.
It really is. It really
really
is.
So, guys, enjoyed the conversation, the engagement. Just want to move forward to what Faye's been sitting on the barracks for a minute. Wanted to do her report if she has one to give. Hopefully she
Curtis,
does.
and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Regular Guy. Mr. Regular Guy, Gerard.
Absolutely.
Faye?
Well, Mr. Chairman.
Yeah, Faye, you ready?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. It's not really much for me to report since our meeting was canceled, as everybody knows. One thing that I wanted just to say is that whatever I was supposed to report or the conversation that I wanted to bring at my committee in the last month is going to be carried on May. And one of the things that I want the board to know is that I've been diligently basically speaking with different school principals and folks in District 6. So in the next meeting, we should have tons of information about things that is going on, with our students, with their parents, and the instability that they are facing and all the challenges that they are trying to cope with, with the learning, with this impersonal, I will say, system, because now everything has to be via internet. So I also wanted to bring to your attention, just in case that happened to any other committee, is that I wasn't really happy to learn that when I notified the board that our meeting was going to be canceled, that notice didn't go out. At least I did not receive that. And this is something that I wish and I appreciate that district manager and the staff pay attention to that, because going unnoticed that the meeting has not been canceled is not a nice thing. It's really very unprofessional. But I think this is something that they should take in consideration, not only for us, but for anybody else. I also just wanted to mention what is my other point that I'm trying to bring is to if anybody interested on the 22nd, the Board of Presidents will hold a conference meeting about youth employment, and I believe other issues are going to be discussed. So people should pay attention to that if they want to join that meeting. I really highly encourage, because we really need to know what is going on with our youth. So more to come in our next meeting in May. Other than that, I thank you, all of you.
Thank you, Faye. Wonderful. Please be safe. Natalie, if you may, with your report.
Yes, hello. So I did want to just make a few announcements and a few responses to a couple of the technical questions that showed up. And once again, I reiterate our gratitude for the way that you guys have handled this. It isn't perfect. We're still working out the kinks, but you guys have done an amazing job at meeting and getting people informed. So as always, we are here to take care of the nuts and bolts. Adele Bartlett and I have been in touch with the State Liquor Authority about what, how they are proceeding. They had, I believe they only canceled one 500-foot rule that was foot hearing that was in the immediate aftermath of the pause, and then moving forward they had a postponed full board meeting, but they are going forward with that. And so if in fact there are any applications, I know that you didn't have any up until now, but if any do come through, they should proceed and get input from the board and community. We realize that there are challenges to, Isidro putting up these posters for the public hearing notice when there's no one necessarily passing by. So we urge you to use your websites and your other, your digital communications, share it with these restaurant associations and business associations to make sure that those public hearing notices get out there if it becomes an issue. As Faye mentioned, the borough president is hosting a virtual summer youth employment town hall, 3 o'clock Wednesday. If you go to her update or to her website, you can get the registration link. And I wanted to thank Liz for commenting on the state of the Uptown arts and culture organizations. It's actually very dire. The borough president, in collaboration with the Greater Harlem Chamber, has been hosting some conversations with the Uptown arts groups. It started off with just the Harlem group, but I am very glad to say that because of some nagging on the part of someone you may know, there will be a panel of Washington Heights and Inwood arts and culture stakeholders at the next meeting, next teleconference, 6:30 p.m. Thursday. So again, look at the updates from the borough president in order to register. I also want to lastly introduce my colleague Tim Anderson, who has joined the meeting and managed to listen to all of you and not run away screaming. He is your brand new Manhattan Borough President's Office Urban Planner for Community Board 12. So everybody welcome Tim.
Thank you, thank you. Glad to be aboard and excited to be working with you all moving forward.
Okay, thanks, Tim. Thank you for welcome aboard. You're in the presence of an extremely talented and motivated and self-disciplined group of people. So this is your platform, this is your family. Welcome, and next time bring cakes, even if they're virtual. Just bring something sweet.
Will do.
That was almost believable.
Okay, so I'd like to hear from Catherine, our first vice chair. I think she has some things that she wanted to talk to us about. Kat?
Hi, everyone. I actually don't have anything to announce unless we spoke about something that maybe you could remind me. It's
Well,
been a very long day.
you
So
just
it's
did.
just
You just say
been,
hi.
okay.
um, well, I think it's been a wonderful meeting. Unless we want to wrap it up with, I missed Aisha. I haven't heard of her today. I wonder if things are okay. Anyone heard from Aisha lately?
Yeah, she's not on the call. She's had a number of losses in her personal circle.
Yeah. Okay, I'll send her a text. Is there anyone else that you guys have missed, or someone that you want to reach out to? I think that we should kind of like do this more often, like sort of like take a roll call to figure out
By
where
the
we
way,
are,
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Faith.
by the way, do you know what's going on with Richard's funeral? Do you know anything about that? I've been wondering.
Last time I heard, unless Ebenezer knows different, a week ago, her sister mentioned that the and I don't want to. I'm looking for the right way of saying it, but the body's still in the morgue. She has not been able to retrieve it. Obviously, in the midst of getting the legal paperwork ready, everything kind of shut down. So things are stale, and things are exactly where they were back in February something, the third week of February, like right in the beginning of March is when things kind of like died down. I haven't spoken to her since 2 weeks ago, but
Since
that's the
February?
last time I heard.
Can I
Yeah,
can I add something to that,
of
Eleazar?
course, yes.
So I just obviously gatherings like funerals really shouldn't be happening, even though there's not a lot of guidelines because exceptions are being made. Even before this closing, Richard's family did want to have direct cremation, so the status of the body will actually no longer be an issue with that. But his surviving family is an elderly person like Richard was, and so she's not going to be coming into the city in order to do a memorial until things become safer and travel becomes safer and people can gather safely. But what I can tell you is that we were blessed with having a wonderful landlord in that building who personally went through all of Richard Lewis's items in order to retrieve a will and personal documents for the sister so that she would not have to come back and search for them herself. He mailed those to her, and the rest of Richard Lewis's belongings are now sitting in my apartment until such time as the family can come retrieve them.
Wow.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Natalie, last but not least, Sally has a question about any updates on community board appointments.
Interesting, yeah.
Natalie?
Community board appointments, we know that they are delayed. As Aldrin announced today at Borough Board to board chairs and council members, we hope that within the next week or two, they can all be made. Ordinarily, we do prefer to announce all Manhattan Board appointees at once. But I will personally be making a request to the borough president to go ahead and notify for those boards for which the decisions have already been finalized. And then as we continue to coordinate with the council members that still need to confirm their nominated folks for appointment and reappointment, which would mean that CB12 would be, one of the first ones to know.
Thank you. Great answer. Unless there's anything to add to the agenda for new business, I'd like to put on the floor an adjournment.
I would just like to say at the next meeting, I hope we have some virtual pizza.
I'll drink to that. Motion to adjourn.
And you want to bring it?
Motion to adjourn. Who seconds it? We need a second. Oh, Jim Berlin seconds it. Okay,
All right.
fellas. Great
Thank
night.
you.
Thank you very much. Be safe.
Good night.
Thank you, everybody. Bye.